Hello and welcome to the RotD Deep Dive spoiler-filled discussion video on Gerald's game. Now I kind of want to discuss the movie itself for a little bit, and again, if the title card and everything hasn't been enough, this as spoilers. A lot of spoilers. I'm just going to freely talk about the movie as if you've seen it, because if you're watching this, you should have. I mentioned in the review that I had forgotten a lot of details about this movie. I had forgotten about the Moonlight Man entirely. And I had certainly forgotten that he was real. So I really loved that they played that as ambiguous as they did. I think the fact that she was seeing things that weren't there in the first place, and then having this otherworldly character there, and then her actually hallucinating him with the red eyes and so forth, I think really sold the ambiguity, so that when it was revealed that he was real, and then the showdown in the courtroom, that packed a really emotional, powerful punch. And I really, really like that. I remember now, having seen that, being really affected by that when I read the book, and it had somehow drifted away from me at that point over the course of the last 20 years. But I thought that was really good. I thought they did that really well. Now, the main part that I was talking about in how brilliant it was that they adapted this into a film was obviously making Bruce Greenwood, Gerald, and her alternative self the devil and angel, basically the voices that are kind of butting heads with her personality and trying to get her through this. And I thought that they did that. I thought the fact that they went that direction was pretty brilliant in itself. But then couple that with the performances and the way that the characters were written, I thought was just absolutely gorgeously brilliant. The lines that Bruce Greenwood delivered, as far as like I said in the review, the point of view, the shift that he had to do, where he is talking about the joke that he told, and talking about how he gave that cocky little pause right before the punchline that you hate so much, obviously from her emotional point of view, but talking to her as the character. And it was really, really interesting to see that shift, and it was very subtle, and it worked really, really, really well. Very impressed with all of that. And the fact that he turned into a little bit of a, why don't you just give up? And her alternative self is, why are you listening to him? And you had this multiple point of view kind of trying to get her out of this situation, while also trying to accept the reality of what's going on. Leading her to the clues that she was envisioning in her own head, but didn't really kind of get there yet, like the glass and, even the water situation at all. Aren't you glad I took that pill? Leading up to the fact that he put the glass of water up above. I'm really, really impressed with that. I really liked how that flowed. That was very brilliant. Now, the difficult situation, the character that Henry Thomas played of her father, this is one that I have kind of been debating with myself on. But I kind of feel it needs to be talked about. And here's why. Is at the time that I'm recording this, I imagine this video will probably be up on YouTube for who knows how long. But at the exact time that I'm recording this, we currently have a Supreme Court nominee who is being accused of wrongdoing when he was in high school. And I committed to keeping this channel apolitical, and I'm going to maintain that. I mean, I made some rules for myself when I decided to create RotD here. And one of them is, no swearing. The other one is apolitical, neutral stance on everything. Just strictly give horror reviews, and I'm going to maintain that. I'm not going to give my stance on a political thing. If somebody wants to, put me on H3 for an interview, I'll swear and give my opinion about anything. But on my channel, I'm neutral. So the facts are right now, just non-opinionated facts, is we currently do have a Supreme Court nominee who is being accused of sexual wrongdoing, and the current political climate is that the people that want him nominated and confirmed for the Supreme Court are blaming the victim, excusing the behavior, and the person who is accusing him is being vilified by them and in the media, and at this point receiving death threats and being forced to move, and her life is being upended, and she is being requested to give Senate testimony. That is currently what is happening right now as of September 23rd, 2018. And I think it was the recent tweet from President Donald Trump that makes me want to talk about this a little bit. And in that tweet, he was asking about, well, why didn't she come forward? It was 30 years ago. And the part of Gerald's game that I thought was probably one of the most brilliant things, and I honestly do not remember if this was in the book or not, if this was something Stephen King drafted, or if this was something the filmmakers did. Whoever did it was brilliant for coming up with it in the first place, but the filmmakers did an excellent job of bringing it to the screen, and Henry Thomas did an amazing job of really selling it. But I'm talking about the portion which happened after the sexual abuse that he incurred upon his daughter. And when he was in her bedroom, and he presented her with a situation where, face value, if you were going to write this scene with very little care and thought, you would just say, well, no, let's keep this our little secret, dear. We wouldn't, want anybody to find out. But that's not the way this went. This went the way of making it her idea, manipulating her into thinking it was her idea, coming at her and saying, we should tell mommy. She probably won't blame you. Well, maybe, but probably not. She'll blame me. But, we should absolutely tell somebody. This has got to be made public, and you have got to be upfront with people, and basically manipulating her and just saying, no, we can't tell people. And that was a really, really powerful thing. It bought her silence. And then her husband later on, Gerald, she said that, he had his power over her through the comfort. And I think that was equally as powerful. I think it's important that we are currently in a situation with the Me Too movement where accusations are being thrown around. And I think that ultimately the point that I want to make is, it's not ultimately the point I want to make. I'm riffing here. So bear with me. I have some points I want to hit, but ultimately I'm just kind of freestyling this. We have people that are currently being judged in the court of public opinion, and I think that's incredibly dangerous. At the same time, I also think it's important for victims' voices to be heard, and that accusations be given credence and weight. And I know how powerful the stance is of wanting to remain silent. It is terrible. And when I was probably around, 11 or 12 years old, I remember that I had my favorite uncle, and I loved him dearly, and he had two sons that were significantly older than I was. I think they were like 17, 18 at the time. And I remember going to visit them at one point, and one of my cousins asked me to come to his room, and he exposed himself to me. And I remember thinking, well, that's peculiar. Well, okay. I remember thinking it, looked different than mine. And it didn't go any further than that at that time. So I didn't say anything. I really honestly was more just baffled by the situation than anything else. It didn't really register with me until later in life what was going on. And then fast forward a few months, and we're all about to go out to dinner. And by this time, he had moved out of his father, my uncle's house, and had an apartment of his own. And we were all going to be going out to dinner from one location to another. And he offered to take me. He just needed to stop by the apartment first and grab something. So he did. And I went up with him, and he wanted to play Truth or Dare with me. And I'm not going to get into any kind of graphic detail, but what I will say is there was a point in which I was registering that something was very wrong. And he never touched me, but there was a state of undress that I thought was very weird and very uncomfortable and didn't match what should be happening. And in this Truth or Dare game, what I wound up doing was daring him to put his clothes back on. And fortunately for myself, he complied. And that was as far as it went. I never said anything to anybody about this. My father was a very physically abusive man that he was scary and big and loving and warm and fierce, and he was a giant grizzly bear with all the cuddliness and all the fierceness that implies. And he was also incredibly homophobic. So I was very deeply ashamed by what happened, and I was scared. I mean, I honestly couldn't figure out what would be worse, if they believed me or if they didn't. And so I kept quiet. I never said anything to anybody. It wasn't until many, 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 many years later that I opened up to a partner of mine. And, she was very understanding, and I was glad that I got it off my chest. And this is the first time that I've ever talked about it in any kind of public forum sense. And I'm not going to name names, but it was, I fought with it for a long time. I minimized it. He never touched me, and, people that have gone through accusations and trials and tribulations and, so forth, they've been, touched and far, far, far worse. So, I minimized what I went through. Well, mine wasn't nearly that bad, so it wasn't bad. And that's wrong. Ultimately, I think it's important that if you have gone through anything like this, any kind of unwarranted touching, any kind of sexual abuse or malfeasance. Sorry, my cat is running around. I think if you have been through any situation where anybody in your life, be it a family member, a coworker, a fellow student, a peer, anybody, has made you feel sexually and physically uncomfortable, that you reach out to resources. And I'm going to look up any kind of national hotline or anything, and I'll put it down here below if I find anything. But I think it's important that you tell somebody. If you're worried about it coming to light, if you're worried about blowback from your family, I understand. I mean, I bottled it for decades, and I absolutely understand. But I think it is important for you to tell somebody, even if it's a neutral party, because I think it is not the kind of thing that should be bottled. And with this Me Too movement, I really, really strongly support it. It is important for people to speak up. And it is important for the folks that would prey on the silence of others to no longer have that power. I mentioned that I've mentioned the sexual abuse from my cousin, and I've kind of touched on the physical abuse from my father. I remember one thing that my father told me when I was younger was, it was, after a particularly nasty round with, him against me and my mother and my sister, where he sat us down and he said, you know, he said, you better not ever call the police, because if I ever go to jail, you better pray I never get out. I was, I think, 6 years old when he said that. And it wasn't until I was 17 or so that the police did wind up getting called. And by that time, and I'm not saying that this is the situation as it is now, I think that things have changed and there is more follow through and more help that is given. But back in the late 90s, when I mentioned this to the police, they said that they filed a report, and my father never even found out that it happened. The police told me straight out that nothing will probably come of this because they focus on the younger kids first. But I remember that silence that I had out of fear, that led me to have silence out of fear with the sexual assault that I had with my cousin later on in life. And silence gained through fear I think it's important to recognize that the person that is maintaining the silence is also the one that has the power. The fear of speaking is what takes that power away, and the act of speaking is what gives that power back. And so to bring it back to the movie, the performance and the writing that had Henry Thomas enact that scene was brilliant in how real it very much is. The ability to silence a victim through manipulation or fear or shame is very real. And I know that there can be a lot of people that are looking at this current situation with the person that has accused the Supreme Court nominee and looked at the backlash that she's receiving, even from presidential tweets that are basically dismissing her, that they could be seeing that as, well, this is why I don't speak. And I think that that is just terribly unfortunate and dangerous. So I guess I want to use this as just an opportunity to say, so I guess I just want to use this as an opportunity to say, please speak for your own health and for your own benefit, for your own safety. Please speak. Even if that means to an anonymous person, to a hotline, to a therapist, to a trusted loved one. Speak to somebody, because it's really important that your voice be heard. And if you ever feel comfortable, raising your voice in a more public area, if you ever feel comfortable confronting the person that has stolen your voice away from you, then please be safe and take care and align yourselves with the people in your lives that you know you can trust and rely on. And just know that you aren't alone, and there is a mountain of support waiting for you. So I think that should about do it for today. This movie obviously struck a pretty good chord with me, and I would like to hear from you. If you Agree with me if you disagree with me regarding the movie and regarding my assessment of it. Please leave comments below. I will be reading them and engaging with them. And as always, especially with these deep dives here, I really appreciate you making me a part of your day. And I hope to see you tomorrow, where it will be, God willing, a little bit more lighthearted. So thank you very much.